Do you want to learn how to sew a hooded bath towel in 15 minutes? It's so easy. It does require a sewing machine, but only takes a few minutes to make. I have a friend who always brings a hooded bath towel as a baby gift, and I always admired it, so I thought you might enjoy it as well. I bought a full-size towel, a hand towel, and a washcloth. We'll be using these two things, the bath towel and the hand towel, to make the hooded towel, and then I just buy the washcloth to add because I think it makes a nice gift. So we're going to start with the hood part, which is made out of the hand towel. The first thing we're going to do is to turn down 4 to 5 inches on one long edge of the hand towel. So I'm going to use my seam gauge and just measure this, and then I'm going to go to my sewing machine and sew straight across here to here, back stitching on both ends. I have pinned a couple pins here along the long edge of my hand towel. I go about 2.5 on my machine with a straight stitch. Back stitch on both ends. And that's pretty thick for a machine to go over. Stay close to the finished edge. And sew all the way across. It's just one long straight seam. Then I clip my threads on both ends. And while I'm here, I'm just going to clip this tag out of the towel. I do try to buy 100% cotton towels. They are very absorbent. This one is 90% cotton. It's a nice thick towel. I really think it's a nice texture. I had some of this nice wide rickrack that I thought would look really cute across the top of this. So I'm going to sew this along this top edge, and then I'm going to tuck the end in and sew that end down after I'm done. So I'm going to hopefully be able to sew through all of these layers. I'm going to sew a little bit around. I don't really want to sew across the edge or it'll show the white across here, so I'm going to actually sew kind of a zigzag stitch, and I'm going to sew twice, one on each edge. If you sew a smaller rickrack, you will not need to do that. It's just because it's a jumbo rickrack. But I just thought it was cute, and I happen to have that in my stash, believe it or not. And by the way, this is on the right side of the towel. This is the side that I tucked under, and I'm putting it on the edge. This is going to be the front edge of the hood. I'm going to tuck that inside where those are sewn together, and then I'm going to sew over that edge and go back the other direction. Okay, so I have my rickrack sewn on, and remember, if you sew the small rickrack, you do not need to make a zigzag line. You can go straight across it with just one seam. But since this is jumbo rickrack, I need to sew both edges down. So it took 2 seams and a kind of a zigzag stitch. So there I have the edge of the hood with the rickrack on it. Alright, so there's the edge of my hood with all of the rickrack sewn on. And now I'm going to sew the back side of the hood on this side. So I'm going to turn it with the right sides to the inside, like this. And then make sure these edges match here. So if I leave it like this, it's going to have a pointy top. So I'm going to use a plate and I'm going to cut around this edge so it rounds it off. This is the only place where I'm going to be actually cutting the towel. And so I'm going to have to make sure it doesn't unravel by zigzagging this edge when I'm done. So there, I've cut off the top, which will round that a little bit in the back of the hood. I'm going to pin this just a couple places, just to hold it in place while I sew it together. So I'm going to sew a seam that starts up here, goes around the edge, and then comes all the way down. And I'll make it about 1/2 inch from the edge here, and then I'm going to zigzag this. And then I'm going to sew fairly close to this finished edge on the hood. When you cut terry cloth, it's kind of messy, so I want to make sure to come back and zigzag that edge. I'm going to backstitch at both ends. You can kind of see I'm making a curved seam, and all I have to do is pull slightly with my hand, and the machine will make the curve for me. I always stop and take out my pins. I don't sew over pins. So now I'm going to come back and do a wide zigzag stitch. So I set my machine on zigzag, and that will finish off this edge so it doesn't unravel. I don't need to zigzag this because it's finished edge, so that's nice. If you have a serger, this would be really easy. I don't have a serger. So there, that's a finished edge now. With the back of the hood sewn and this zigzag so it doesn't unravel, now we're going to sew this hood onto the towel. I'm going to measure the center point in the top of my towel by just folding it in half and putting a pin right where the center would be. So this is going to be this top edge of the towel, and that's going to be where I sew the hood onto. Next, I'm going to take the bottom edge of the hood and I'm going to sew it. Here it is, right side out, like this. And I'm going to sew it with the center point there on the center point of the towel. I'm going to open that seam out just because my machine can't really sew this heavy fabric very easily. Terry cloth's pretty thick. I'm going to put this down about 1 inch, and then I'm going to sew right here next to this finished edge. So I'm going to take this little pin out, but there's the center point of my towel, and there's the center point of the hood. I'm going to pin this in place a few places across this edge, and it's about an overlap of about 1 inch. I'm going to go just a little bit more than that, about 1 inch. Yeah, it's a little bit more than 1 inch. Kids love these. They're so warm and cozy when they get out of the bathtub. I'm going to go back to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew straight across here. Then I'm going to turn the towel the other direction and I'm going to sew straight across here to hold it in place. Here's the seam I'm going to sew, just right above this piece of edging. I'm going to have the towel laying flat underneath. And I'm hoping my sewing machine can handle all these layers. My machine is not a heavy-duty machine. I'm going to do this with a straight stitch and back stitch at both ends. There we have that seam done. Okay, it's sewn on, and now I'm going to turn it over and sew again on the top edge here on this side of the towel, so there isn't this little flap. So here's our last seam, and this is just to hold this little flap down. And I'll sew right along the finished edge of the towel. This is the top edge of the towel and the bottom edge of the hood. This is the center of the hood and the center of the towel, so there's a thicker amount of material here, so I'm going to go real slowly. Okay, I have to admit my machine really struggled on the thickness of these layers of terry cloth. So if your machine isn't a heavy-duty machine, you might consider getting a little lighter weight towel. This one was the thickest one I could find, and I do like it very much. It's 100% cotton and will be very absorbent and nice, but it was kind of hard to sew on. Okay, so I've sewn both sides of that seam, and that is all there is to it. We are done with our towel. So here's our hooded part, and the towel is down below, and I will fold this up and I'm going to add the washcloth. So now we know how to sew a hooded towel in 15 minutes. A great gift for the kids in your life. For more sewing ideas for kids, come on over to welcometonanas.com and join the fun.